The month of November is often a month where we take a look back at the rest of the year and see where we've come. Or in our case, the last several years, to see the progress we've made. Today's episode is no different. We were actually inspired by a channel we're big fans of, Evan Shanks, who went back and talked to the current owner of the Subaru that he built that really kind of helped lay a foundation for his channel. And we felt inspired to go back and look at the cars that we've had and kind of see where they're at now. If you've been a part of this channel for any length of time, then you already know that the Honda Civic we used to have was where we started. And it started with the episode called Evo Most Wanted, where we talked about getting an Evo, why we wanted to get an Evo, what was great about them. It was probably the cringiest show I've ever shot. That wasn't just me being stupid, it was me being genuine. And while I have grown a lot since 2015, 2016, whenever that was filmed, that little white Civic was quite the workhorse. A great car, very comfortable, but unfortunately it was totaled by a deer. I was on my way to Ishmael's actually helping with some car troubles that they were having at his house, and yeah, had that car for not even a full year and it was done for. Around that same time, Ishmael had moved to the area. We had started our friendship and we had gotten straight to work, making very poor life decisions. His first car when he lived here and was a part of the channel was the little red Miata. It wasn't in a lot of videos because we didn't do a lot of stuff with it, but that little car suffered incredibly at our hands. It was not, oh, it was not good. I don't think Ishmael ever did a single oil change in that car. That car was done-ski from the beginning, and somehow it's still being driven around in Georgia. Last I heard, the owner took it back with him to Georgia after we sold it to him. So now that brings you two cars that are a little bit more modern for our channel, because now we've got a car that still makes a regular appearance on the channel, and that is Mitsu-chan. It was the silver Lancer I picked up that really started to kind of help take our channel off onto the next stratosphere of 1,000 subscribers. We did a bunch of support mods for that thing. We never really got into the engine, and since we owned it, it was owned by a friend of ours that we sold it to him. He had it for about a year to 2 years, I want to say, and then Ian picked it up. Yes, Ian is now the owner of Mitsu-chan. It's his daily. He drives it around. He takes pretty good care of it, and we're actually going to be doing some work on it here in the near future. Eyeballing a stereo upgrade from the Sony that we put in it years ago to a newer Alpine, and also now we're looking at doing possible coilovers, because it sounds like our shocks might be dying in the car. They are the original shocks, and the car has, I want to say, 110,000 miles on it now, so it's due for an upgrade. Next up on our list, the twins. We bought two 240SXs for $1,000. We got one as a parts car for free that was in bad shape, and a really nice burgundy coupe. It was in great shape. It was slammed, automatic, and as someone who drove it more than the owner did, actually not that bad. It was Ishmael's two cars. We went down to Fredericksburg, or at least that area, to go pick them up. They were pretty fun cars, but the hatchback never worked, hence why we named it the Junk 40. And the coupe, which we nicknamed Ruby, as a credit to John, we were just not able to work on it. There was a lot wrong with the suspension, and we couldn't physically jack the car up to do anything with. And so we figured, why not sell this one, recoup the cost that it took to get this one, and go invest it into something else. So Ruby went to a set of owners up in Connecticut, where it's currently still living, last we checked. We don't have VinWiki or anything like that for the car, but that's as far as we know where that one went. However, the Junk 40 has had quite a rough life. It honestly needs its own episode of Special Victims Unit. Olivia Benson needs to be on the case with this poor thing. When we got it, it was a junk car. It was a parts car. And we actually were going to try and strip it down and turn it into a drift car because it's already macked as is. Why not? Unfortunately, once we got to work, we found out that there were massive holes in the floor, tons of rust in a bunch of different places, And we realized very quickly that we couldn't really do anything with it, so we were going to give it to one of our friends, but then they couldn't take it either, so we threw it on Facebook Marketplace and we gave it away for free. The car then went to the new owner's location. It was locked because unfortunately we couldn't find the key for it forever, so it was permanently stuck like this, cocked to one side, and the owners eventually just left it in a field. And that's where that car sat for months. Well, it turns out that that field was actually a mud pit, because then someone that we know, part of another car group in Winchester, ended up picking up the car from that person. And they ended up parting it out for the most part. They took it apart, figured out what was still good, and used the parts for their own little part shop, if you will. And that's where we came back in contact with it later. It ended up using some of those parts to fix Kintsugi, which is our current gold 240 SX project. It's kind of hard to believe that that poor car went full circle from a piece of junk to actual gold that saved our car and allowed it to stay running. But welcome to the life of this channel, where anything's possible apparently. That car then went on to 2 other owners. It's now currently sitting somewhere in the western part of Virginia, not West Virginia. And that guy has been trying to sell that car now for almost a year, because it's so rusted out from sitting in that field that shock towers are completely gone. It's more or less a rolling shell that if you roll it and hit a bump, it will be a sitting shell. Oh, the Junk 40 just cannot catch a break. This is now the year 3 setup. This is where we moved into what actually got our channel to be where it's at now. And that was with the golden children of my car and Ishmael's car, the Evo. Rika, there's a picture behind me that you can't see because it's out of screen. That was always my dream car. I wanted an Evo since I was a kid. That's why we did the whole Evo Most Wanted episode in that Civic. And it has been a blast. For those who don't know the backstory of that car, it was owned by one owner, original owner since '03. It was part of the first batches of cars available here in the United States for the first time ever. We'd never had an Evo before that, and this car was part of that group that opened the doors for us to know what it was like to have an Evo. He ended up owning it for the entire duration of the rest of his life. He unfortunately passed away, and his mother parted out his estate, which meant that that car needed to be sold. He had a couple bikes and things like that that ended up getting sold, but this car sat for a year at a shop in Florida. Unfortunately, their clientele, they didn't really want to sell that car to anybody because none of them would have bought it. But me, being a bit of a sucker, wanted an Evo, saw it at a decent price, and then realized how valuable the yellow color was, said, yeah, let's go ahead and buy it. What we didn't know was the amount of work it's going to take to get that car running the way it was supposed to. See, they had tried to set timing at the shop we bought this car from. Turns out they set timing on a stretch belt, and with it being an interference motor, it's a miracle that that engine was still in good shape up until the day we finally did blow it. We ended up spending tons of money to finally get it to run, only for us to then realize later the transmission blew up because there was no fluid in it. The shop in Florida never put transmission fluid back in it because it was totally bone dry, and there were never puddles underneath this car. So of course, it means we need to get another transmission. At this stage in the game, I was ready to give up. I was ready to throw in the towel on this because I had spent thousands of dollars, and the car was still a massive paperweight with a pretty hefty tax, and my insurance for that car was like $200 a month at the time. I was ready to give up. Ishmael looked at me and said, you give up on that car, you will hate yourself later. You're gonna love that car when you get it running, and you will drive the daylights out of it when you do. And he was right. I was super glad I kept the car because once I got it back, we did so much stuff with it. By the time we were done, we were making over 400 to the wheels, and now, the car is still in the shop, yes, but we're getting that motor built. The engine's capable of $1,000. The transmission is capable of $1,000. We need to build up our T-case and rear differential, but pretty much the whole drivetrain is ready to go 1,000 horsepower. Will we ever go there? No. I don't plan to. I don't want to. want this car to be a fun street car with a good chunk of power, but like late stage power, so that I can actually drive it and enjoy myself on the highway and not just, you know, race car it everywhere. While it is a race car because we've done like bushings and built suspension and all that stuff, we still want it to feel like a street car that we can just take to a meet or go cruise with our friends. And I feel like we've really been successful in that area with that car. That car ended up becoming our flagship. That one and the Gold 240. Named Kintsugi after the art of repairing pottery with gold, knowing it'd be more valuable, we spent tons of time underneath that car getting all kinds of suspension work put together for it. But the one thing that always killed that car was wiring problems and overheating, ever since the day we got it. See, in Natural Bridge, after our long trek trying to get that car all the way from North Carolina to here in Virginia, we finally gave up, because every 20 miles or 20 minutes we'd have to pull over for the car to boil over and spill out all the contents that was inside of it. Clearly the guy who had it didn't drive it all that much, or else he would have known about this overheating problem. That said, we got straight to work putting that thing back together, making it drivable, making it run, and we put a lot into that car. The suspension that's in it is pretty much fully built with chassis braces and sway bars and fully built arms and end links. There is not a single bit of rubber in our suspension. Everything is solid bushings, and that car is extremely tight as a result. We're not done with it though. We still got some engine work that we want to do. We're going to swap out that engine and transmission for something better. We've eyeballed a couple of things. We've said we were going to do a couple of things, but pretty soon we're going to commit to doing one thing, and you will find out very shortly what that will be. But right now, it remains a mystery. In addition to also switching over to a 5-lug setup to get better wheels and better tires. Because as is, the ones that are on our car are really heavy, and we want to get something lighter to complement the now much lighter chassis, since it doesn't have all this bulky, heavy iron parts, and instead has all this very nice CNC'd aircraft aluminum parts. Now after that era of cars, which is still current but not our mainstays, we now get to the cars that we use to drive around every day. And that is pretty much what has been on the channel for the last 2.5 years. Because it's where we're at, you know? We gotta roll with the punches. Let's start with the easy one, and that is Ishmael's Ford Raptor SVT. It was the first generation of Raptor, and this was actually a dealership queen. Meaning it wasn't actually in their shop all the time, it was what they used to try and get people from off the highway into the showroom floor. And as a result, it was really well maintained and was fully loaded. For that style of truck, that meant a lot of money was put into it. It already had upgraded parts throughout the vehicle, like MagnaFlow exhausts and pretty much SVT everything, including a nice little heads-up display unit. But yeah, it's the daily. And as a result, it got beat up a lot by us, which meant we needed to get new shocks, fresh alignments, fresh tires. And to this day, our tire review has still remained one of the #1 most watched videos on the channel. And then we get to my list of cars that I bought to have a project for us to still work on the channel, and unfortunately never panned out to really anything. First car on that list is our Lexus IS300 manual. That car was really nice, a lot of fun, pretty dated, but a lot of fun. We ended up putting a good amount of money into trying to make it into like a VIP style car for the little bit of time that we had it for. Slammed it down, put some nice Avid ones on there, and very quickly learned how much we don't like Tane coilovers. See, the coilovers that we had on Ruby were Tanes, and we couldn't stand them because parts were cheap, and as a result they broke and we couldn't take the coils off the car when we did finally get it in the air. So what possessed me to put Tanes on our Lexus, God only knows. All I know is they were terrible, and even at max preload and everything else, it still sagged incredibly, and I think a lot of that was due to the fact that it's just a naturally heavy car. It then had issues with the steering rack leaking, and we got burnt out on the project, I'll be honest with you. It was nice and it was a good cruiser, but we just were not prepared for the amount of issues and trouble we were going to have either to modify it or fix it. So he ended up selling it to our friend Will Owings. He owned it for a while and actually just recently traded it to one of our other friends, Mr. Spicy Meatball himself, Kai, who I believe is now trying to sell it as well. So basically, nobody wants this car. It really was a good car. It's just, I don't think any of us were ready for a car like that. Just given everything we knew about the car and the W58 transmission and all that, I don't think we were ready. But it was LSD, and I did get one quality drift out of it that I think impressed a total of 4 people who saw it, and still impresses myself that I pulled it off because that was my first time ever trying it, and I drifted a probably 100 to 200 foot space. So that was pretty cool. But other than that, that's all we did with that car. We didn't have that car for very long. Next in the batting order was our green Civic. We had some pretty grandiose plans for that car. We were actually gonna go big block Honda with a B20Z out of a Honda Orthia, or Orithia, I can't remember how it's said. It basically had a bigger exhaust cam. It was fairly lopey out the door and used a lot of LS parts, but also not LS parts for you Honda people. It was a really unique motor that we now have actually parted out the project to because we got burnt out very quickly. And I spent $7,000 on a project that I was hoping to only spend $700 on. But instead I spent $700 on a half shaft because Honda. We did get a startup out of it and it sounded great. It honestly sounded like some kind of loped out, cammed out, almost LS-ish sounding thing. It was really unique.
Success!
And it would have made a ton of power because we know what that felt like. Our friend Robbie actually has one in an EG shell. We had the EK, and personally I like the EK better. It's just my styling. I like the anime eyes, it's a good look. But that EG is nothing to shake a fist at. That thing is actually still pretty fast and has a V20 in it, and we know what that's capable of. Now, our motor is actually being transplanted into that car eventually. It might actually end up in something else. We'll have to catch up with Robbie sometime and find out. We ended up bringing it back to the church lot and ended up selling it to a guy in the HOA who's now become a great friend of ours and one of our good car buddies, Craig, who now plans to do a K-swap all-wheel drive into that car. Very excited to see what that's going to look like because we've talked about doing some film work together for that one. And he's actually very influential in the completion and finalizing of our very next car, which has become our last car on this list, the Mitsubishi Eclipse. Fun fact for those who don't know, we actually bought the Eclipse because there was a car we were looking at a year before when we were looking at the green Civic. It was one of the couple cars that we had eyeballed, and unfortunately the green Civic was cheaper and they reached out to us first. And then a year later we were able to pick up the very car we wanted from the beginning, which, if I'm honest, would have been really nice because, yeah, the Eclipse was a much better ride even if it didn't have all this extra stuff. I enjoyed that car far more and probably would have had a much better time of it and maybe have even built it if I had bought it first. But alas, bygones be bygones, we had it at this point in time. It was a car that we had some decent plans for and we were actually going to give it to my brother John, but unfortunately some circumstances took place and we were no longer able to give him the car. But nevertheless, we still pressed on and we got a lot of stuff built up in the car. We got suspension, we got stuff that was never on the car originally, like a front sway bar, a beautiful Yonaka exhaust that ended up actually being stolen out of the car, so we had to get another one, in addition to a beautiful Pioneer head unit that also got stolen. They're very easy to break into. I don't know if I ever mentioned that, probably more than a few times. Yeah, I thought so too. Unfortunately, we had to let that one go as well. It's now living in Hagerstown. The guy who I'm still in contact with has some pretty good plans for it. I'm very excited to see where that car is going to go. Hopefully, I can get some contacts and deets and maybe link up with him in the future to see where he takes it from here. He mentioned turboing that 420A. I agree it would be a very good upgrade for it and be ridiculously fast if you can get someone to tune it on a DSM link or something like it. But that's where we stand now. And in between those cars, I bought the RAV4. Honorable mention, I know, But it's been a workhorse daily. It's dragged around multiple motors for multiple projects, including our green 240SX project that Ian owns. We are going to be doing an Evo swap on that. Please, if there's anything you watch on this channel, when that series comes out, please check it out, because while there have been other cars that have done this swap, they've never shown you what it took to do it. And we plan to do everything we can, like a film crew, to show you the process of making a car like that swap with an Evo engine. And we're very excited to see where that project goes. The other honorable mentions, the Metropolitan and the Ruckus. Ishmael now owns the Ruckus. It's his property. We're going to still work on it here for a little bit longer before we bring it out to where he lives there in Round Hill. And I'm very excited to kind of get into that again, just because having ridden the Metropolitan after getting it running, that's going to be a lot more fun to ride, because it's bigger, it's longer, and realistically, it makes more power, which means it goes faster. And for someone of my weight, which is above 260, yeah, that'd be quite the ride to be able to sit down and just go somewhere on. And with that said, what are our future plans? Well, right now it's just that Evo swap on the 240, and working on projects here and there between the bikes, the Evo when it does come back, and also the Lancer. There probably is going to be other stuff that happens as well, and we are looking at picking up another project, something that we've never tackled before on this channel. But for right now, where we sit is where we sit, and we have been super blessed and incredibly thankful for every step of that journey with you guys, with our friends that have helped us out with these projects over the years, which is why there's been a lot of introspection and looking at where we've come from and where we've been on this channel over the last couple of episodes. So I hope you guys appreciate this little step back through time, and we hope that you'll stick around to see our future. And with that said, God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time. Peace. I'm just gonna sit there. You that tired, give me a long get up. Yeah, he's just gonna sit there and go sleep. Maybe we should get a project for you. You think you could drive a car? Drive a car? Yeah? Maybe? 232? That was it?